if you go onto someone else's private residential property and go into their home and do not have explicit permission from them in advance to carry a firearm there, you're committing a misdemeanor and face time in jail.
I'm Duane Urban, and welcome to the Urban Defense Podcast, featuring discussion on firearms, concealed carry, self-defense, the law, and much more. Designed to inform, educate, and increase your survival in a critical incident. This episode was recorded in front of a live audience at one of our legislative update seminars. Okay, welcome everyone to tonight's event, which is sponsored by the USCCA. They have a table in the back, and we'll be hearing from them shortly. Tonight, we will be discussing the 2024 Maryland legislative session, what bills made it through, and what you need to know. Also, we'll be discussing the HQL and Senate Bill 1 litigation and what the status is on that. This event will be a live filming for the next episode of the Urban Defense Podcast, so stay tuned for that. My name is Duane Urban. I'm the creator and one of the admins of the Maryland Gun Owners Group on Facebook, the owner of Urban Defense LLC, and the host of the Urban Defense Podcast. Along with me tonight is Urban Defense Podcast co-host, attorney Andrew Saller, managing partner of Saller, Lord, Ernstberger, and Inslee. Thanks for being here tonight, Andrew.
Thank you for having me, Duane, and thank you all for coming.
As I said earlier, tonight's event has been sponsored by the USCCA, so I'd like to take a moment to introduce Chris Pruitt to step up and tell us about the USCCA, what they offer, and why that might be important for you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. By a quick show of hands, because I already know quite a few are already USCCA members, but how many are USCCA members out of this group? Nice. Okay, so a little bit about what the organization is, what it represents, and why it's important to have a membership. So the USCCA really focuses on three major categories when we're talking about self-defense: mental, physical, and legal preparation. Because when you make a mental decision, it's a lot more difficult than the physical decision. Anybody can press a trigger. That's the easy part. Making the correct decision is what becomes very difficult, because if it's a 6'7", 340-pound man with a teardrop tattoo attacking me, yeah, that decision's a lot easier than when a 13-year-old kid puts a gun on my back, but in both situations, I have to respond in the same amount of time. Now, the USCCA, the memberships that they have, there's three different member levels: Gold, Platinum, Elite. The difference between them is how much training that you receive access to. The insurance benefit's the same on the back half. But when we're looking at the difference in memberships, the training is all on an online training platform, very similar to YouTube or Netflix. But the difference is you're going to actually get credible information from a national training organization. You're going to go through at your own pace. You can log on anytime, any time of the day or night, go through, run through whatever training you want to run through, and then kind of go about your life as you go through there. Just fit 10, 15 minutes in through the course of your day. You'll be able to finish the training in just under 2 months as you go through that process. Now, as we look at the insurance benefit on the back half, the insurance benefit is really focused on making sure that we have some form of back-end plan. In the case that I'm put into a self-defense incident, I want to make sure that there's a couple things that I have in place. One is making sure that I have a phenomenal attorney sitting by my side, right? What's up?
How are we doing tonight, Chris?
So
Not guilty.
Thank you. The USCCA has vetted over 1,500 attorneys across all 50 states and U.S. territories. Now, here in the state of Maryland, one of our USCCA appellate attorneys is Andrew. So in the case that you do get put into an incident and you're trying to figure out who you want representing you, you get put into an incident, you call in and say, hey, I'm a USCCA member. I was put into an incident, forced to defend my life. I want Andrew Saller to represent me. They are then going to aid you in that process of ensuring that that actually occurs. With the insurance benefit, all USCCA members become an additional insured in a self-defense liability insurance policy issued to the USCCA. In layman's terms, there's no deductibles and you don't have to worry about the cost of membership changing if you're the one put into an incident. Now, when we look at the coverage limits, there's $2 million annually for damages if they're awarded in civil court. If I press a trigger, can we agree that it's reasonable that someone is probably going to try to make an attempt to sue me, right? And if they either win or a settlement agreement is reached, I am obligated to pay that financial responsibility, whereas that $2 million bucket is designed to pay that on my behalf. There's no limit to defense expenses, both civil and criminal court, which is going to pay for attorneys, expert witness, private investigators, whatever is deemed necessary to help you prove your innocence. So if you're put into a situation and you want someone like Andrew sitting by your side, but you don't have necessarily the funds to be able to afford that right off the bat, this is a way for you to be able to have that covered for you so that you can have someone like him represent you. There's also $100,000 for cost of bail expense. So if bail is set at $1 million, 10% is going to be that $100,000. That's where that piece is going to be applicable. That top member level with access to all of the training, insurance benefit, everything in totality is $49 a month. Now, the beauty of the membership is that all of the training is really the major difference between the membership levels. You have the freedom to jump up or down whatever member level you see fit for you during that period of time. So if you're someone who wants to make sure that you're educated and prepared for that and make sure that you're trained enough to be able to save your life in the first place, you can go at that top member level, go through all of that training, and then reevaluate once you finish the training on which membership may make most sense for you at a later date. Now, from there, everybody who joins at Platinum or Elite throughout the course of the night will be receiving an ammo can with a hat patch, bullet USB drive with 16 additional hours of training, a training booklet with 10 live fire, dry fire drills, as well as a plastic mold of a Glock 17 so that you can train in the comfort of your own home and not have to worry about buying spackle or anything like that after you decide to train for 10 minutes. And then there's also a money back guarantee for the whole year. So when I ask people if they would do the training, if it was completely for free, everybody unanimously typically says, well, yeah, that makes sense. If it was free, I would do it. So if you go with a USCCA membership, you go through all the training, you finish all the training, then you reevaluate to determine if the membership makes sense for you. You have the right to get all of your money back in that first year if you decide against it at that point. But we want to make sure that you're educated on the differences through experience, not just through word of mouth. So go through it, experience it, then make your decision. If it's not right for you at that point, call, request all your money back. They return every single penny. There's zero risk in actually joining. There's more risk in walking out of the door without a USCCA membership. And that's part of the reason why we're here to discuss this with you. Now, towards the intermission and stuff of that nature, I will be in the back with iPads to be able to help people get registered or answer any questions that you guys may have. I'm here to answer any questions that you guys have about the membership, what it entails, or give any points of clarity for you guys throughout the course of that time. I'm going to turn the microphone back over to these guys over here so that we can kind of get into the meat and potatoes of what we all really came here for. I appreciate it and excited to welcome you all to the USCCA family on top of it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So we'll be starting tonight's event with a discussion on the featured bills from the 2024 Maryland legislative session. And somewhere in the midst of all that, we'll take a brief intermission where you can use the restroom, talk with our guests and vendors in the back. Then we'll resume and finish going over the bills if need be. And then we will get into the SB1 and HQL litigation updates. After that, there'll be a question and answer period, which I'll announce. In order to make sure we get through all the material, we ask that you hold all your questions until that period. We're not going to take any questions during the presentation portion. Once the event is concluded, you'll have the opportunity to visit one-on-one with myself or Andrew or anyone in the back, as well as any of the vendors. Urban Defense LLC has a table in the back, so feel free to stop by and see me and ask about your firearms training needs, especially our Maryland handgun permit course and our new force-on-force reality-based training program. Also in the back, you'll find representatives from the USCCA as well as Saller, Lord, Ernstberger, and Inslee. Restrooms are in the back corner over there under the sign that says restrooms. And also, in order to keep the venue clean, we ask that you please use the 2 provided trash cans over there by the door, and we greatly appreciate your assistance with that. So let me go ahead and start tonight's program with a disclaimer and then a statement. So first, the disclaimer. All statements made during this event are intended for educational purposes only and are not intended to convey legal advice or create an attorney-client relationship. The host, sponsors, and speakers highly recommend that you seek the assistance of legal counsel regarding any questions you may have regarding firearms laws in the state of Maryland. Now, second, the statement. No one on this stage tonight serves as part of the Maryland General Assembly, and none of us had anything to do with any laws that were proposed or passed. So please remember that while you're asking questions, making statements, or interacting with us or our staff or any of the guests. Don't shoot the messenger, please. With that said, let's go ahead and let's get into it. So Andrew, we had a little bit of an interesting session this year. What are your general takes on everything and the overall theme, if you will?
You may not know it. Everyone drove here on the roads. Everything looked normal. Everyone sent their children to school today. Everything seemed normal. Everyone went to work today. Everything seemed normal. The state of Maryland is out of money.
Say it ain't so.
Astoundingly so. So
What happened to that surplus that we had?
I can only wonder where we spent it.
Yeah.
But as a result, this session, I was down there. The vast majority of the time was spent on taxes. Where can they find more money? How can they get it out of you all to afford various programs, the Curwin plan, things of that nature? As horrible as it is, the destruction of the Key Bridge could not have come at a worse time. Well, how are we going to fund the rebuilding of that, as well as all of these other ancillary programs you're going to hear about? This year, the focus, unlike last year with Senate Bill 1, was how can we tax everything? And then some people got together and said, you know what would be great? Why don't we tax the Second Amendment while we're at it? Because we don't care for firearms, we don't care for ammunition, and this is an opportunity to tax them. So we'll be getting into that, but that's going to be the overarching theme of this legislative session. How can we make money? I don't know if you've all heard, but we're going to have Uber taxes from here on out. Vehicle registration fees are going up appreciably. The biggest thing this year was how can we tax people?
All right. So for those of you who tuned in previously, and we do encourage you to tune in if you're interested in these types of things, we discussed over 26 proposed bills, most of which did not advance or will not advance to the governor's desk for signature, but 2 of which did. Before we get into those 2 bills that did, I'd like to discuss 2 that did not. And although they did not make it, they are of concern and they do deserve some attention. I imagine we may see them in one form or another again. One of those bills that didn't make it but is of concern is House Bill 430, the Firearms Liability Insurance Public Wearing and Carrying. I know a lot of you have a lot of interest in that. Andrew, what is it and what does it do?
They want, it did not work, but 15 sponsors in the House got together. This is not 1 or 2 deranged individuals. This is 15 delegates got together and
well, they may be deranged. I mean,
that is possible.
Probably.
That is possible. There's at least 15 of them down there, though, and they proposed that everyone, if you were carrying a firearm, you had to have $300,000 in liability coverage, or you are committing a crime. And if you were arrested and did not have the liability coverage, which is a crime in and of itself, you would lose your rights to possess firearms, period. And some people would say a constitutional right, we're going to ensure that. Why don't we make you have insurance if you want to speak in public, if you want to vote, if you want to exercise any other constitutional right, maybe you have to have insurance for that.
Yeah, poll tax, right?
A poll tax, maybe we'll bring them back, and that idea may have gone. And this got some traction. The concern is there are no insurers in Maryland on the common market that are just going to offer this type of insurance. You can't call up Geico right now. You can't call up Allstate, State Farm, and say, I need $300,000 in liability insurance for a firearm-related incident. And if you did, your insurer is going to say, what are you thinking of doing, sir? It's not commonly available. So you're going to have to come up with, in the time the bill is signed and enacted on October 1st, various insurance programs that are going to be MIA, the Maryland Insurance Administration, compliant to offer this. And at least in my experience, I'm sure everyone knows their car insurance has gone up appreciably the past several years. And I'm sure there are some people here with $300,000 limits, but I can only imagine how much Geico, Allstate, State Farm, etc. would be charging for that. You could be talking $5,000 to $10,000 in premium every year just to exercise your Second Amendment rights. This has been a recurring theme. Maryland did not think of this on their own. Other jurisdictions have been pushing this. So this is something everyone needs to be cognizant of. When this is discussed, make sure you let your delegate know, your state senator go. I guarantee they're going to bring this up again next year. You do not want this to happen.
Another one of these responses to Bruin, I would assume, where they say, you know what, you can carry, but we're going to make it so difficult for you to carry that you're not going to want to.
Yes, it's common sense. Why wouldn't we want there to be insurance? You have to have automobile insurance to drive. Why not insurance to carry a firearm? And the answer to that, obviously, nowhere in the Constitution do I see mention of the right to drive a car. But I do see a Second Amendment in the Constitution, and they don't really have a good response to that.
Understood. Okay, and the second bill that didn't make it but is of concern is House Bill 935, which was cross-filed as Senate Bill 784, the Comprehensive Community Safety Funding Act. And before we get into that, just for people that don't understand, Andrew, maybe you can help us understand. Sometimes we'll see a bill, it'll be a House bill, and then it'll say cross-filed as, and there'll be a Senate bill. And that bill will either have the same title, similar language, or even the same language. Now, why is that?
Going back to high school civics class, for a bill to become a law, it's got to pass the House of Delegates and the state Senate. They got to pass the identical version, and then the governor has to sign it. If you introduce it just into the House, it's got to go through there and then go to the state Senate, and all of this takes time. The session only, thankfully, lasts 90 days. So bills that they are very serious about passing, they'll introduce it into the state Senate and the House of Delegates at the same time to speed up how quickly they can pass it to make sure they do not run out of time.
All right. So the Comprehensive Community Safety Funding Act, what was that?
Everyone here, I'm sure, says they do a wonderful job at shock trauma down in the city. Everyone here says probably the physicians at shock trauma do a wonderful job. Everyone here says it's probably good that we do have violence intervention throughout the state of Maryland. And everyone would probably agree, maybe it would be a good idea that we have funds set aside for the survivors of homicide victims. But no one would agree that the best way to do that would be an 11% tax on firearms and firearms accessories and ammunition. That was what was proposed here. It originally started as an excise tax, and not to bore people, but excise tax that's paid by the importer into the state, the wholesaler. None of you would, unless you are an FFL importing large volumes of ammunition into the state directly from a manufacturer, would ever deal with that. So they were trying to slip that in. You would obviously deal with it on the back end as prices would naturally rise for firearms and firearms accessories and ammunition. But the problem with an excise tax is it's difficult to collect. If you manufactured a firearm in the state of Maryland, you couldn't apply the excise tax. If you manufactured ammunition in Maryland, you couldn't apply the excise tax. So they decided, as things were progressing, to change it into a sales tax. Everyone knows there's a 6% sales tax on everything across the board in Maryland for the most part, 9% on alcohol. Well, to do it one better, and once again with the theme of the session this year, we're going to make an 11% tax on all ammunition, all firearms, and all firearms accessories. Magazines, magazine loaders, scopes, optics, stocks, grips, handguards, and body armor, ironically, and ammunition. It was going to be an 11% tax. And the goal of that was to use the money to go to shock trauma and all of these other causes that no one's going to object to at the forefront. But once again, once a tax comes here, I'm sure we've all seen it over my lifetime at least, rarely do they ever go away. And this was going to be a plan directly targeting the Second Amendment to increase all of our taxes. The state Senate passed this and got it over into the House. And the House, thankfully, had a few common sense people who pointed out this would be completely unconstitutional. You cannot, for instance, tax the ink that newspaper sellers use more than anything else, or do anything like that to skirt around the Second Amendment. Doesn't mean they're not going to try again next year. And if people do not fight and object to these things happening, don't be shocked when all of a sudden you go to purchase a firearm and there's an 11, 10, or 15% tax, or if they could do it, 100% tax.
Yeah, so stay tuned on those things then. And those two did not make it, by the way, thankfully.
But they've made it elsewhere. You'll see it. It's in California. It's in other states. And Maryland, unfortunately, sees these ideas in other states and says, let's copy and do it here.
A lot of plagiarism going on there.
Yes.
All right, so with that said, let's go ahead and get into the two bills that did pass and are on their way to the governor's desk for signature and that we need to know about. First, we have House Bill 810, Rapid Fire Activator Switch Auto Sear Prohibition. So, Andrew, what can you tell us about this bill here?
This was introduced by the Speaker of the House. Whenever you see the Speaker of the House introduces a bill, you know they're serious about it, and it's probably going to pass. I really question, and I'll just ask, how many of you know what a switch or auto sear is?
Maybe a couple.
We got some hands here. Well, in Maryland now, we're going to define it as a switch or auto sear is a device that applies force to a firearm's trigger bar to prevent it from limiting the weapon to firing only one round each time the trigger is depressed.
Already illegal under federal law.
Absolutely.
So for some reason, there was the thought that this sort of thing would be necessary. I can only suspect that this is designed to go after these Glock auto switches, Glock auto sears, but and I could be wrong. I'm not entirely certain that the item that is in the Glock auto sear actually has physical contact with the trigger bar. But again, I might be wrong on that. So,
if you have an auto sear, now you're facing a misdemeanor up to 3 years in jail. And if you use it in a crime of violence, a mandatory minimum of 5 years and up to 20 years in prison. So bear that in mind if you're going to go on a shooting spree. Maybe leave your auto sear at home.
I just wonder how the feds wouldn't take a case like that and how it would end up in the state courts. But maybe
I am unsure if this is actually a problem. I don't know. Do any people here regularly encounter people shooting at them with auto sears? Is that something that we've got going on? No response.
Probably not. So, all right. So that's one that doesn't apply too much to everyone in this room. So now let's go to the second bill here. This is going to be House Bill 947, which was, again, cross-filed as Senate Bill 488, the Gun Industry Accountability Act of 2024. And this is pretty troubling. Andrew, what can you tell us about this?
I am sure there's going to be someone in the audience who's going to say, well, what about the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act? That was an act passed by the United States Congress during the George Bush administration that would prohibit lawsuits against firearm manufacturers that make firearms that are used, unlawfully, but as designed. So the analogy being you don't sue Ford if a drunk driver hits you. Well, this is designed to get around that and to allow that to happen. This right here does potentially pave the way for the elimination of the firearms business and industry in the state of Maryland. Other states have done this. New York, Pennsylvania have similar. Once again, Maryland plagiarizes these things from elsewhere. We didn't just think this up on our own. I'm sure everyone is aware of the tragedy that happened at Sandy Hook, and Remington ended up settling that situation for $73 million. This law, in its original form, was going to allow anyone to sue the gun industry both completely upstream.
And so this wasn't just manufacturers, though.
No, yeah. This is going to be everyone who is involved in the sale, manufacture, distribution, importation, or marketing of a firearm-related product.
So your local gun store.
Absolutely.
Your local Dick's Sporting Goods, potentially, if they still sell guns. I assume they do.
Absolutely. And then the distributor who sold it to them. and it's going to be firearm-related products as well. The firearm, ammunition, a component or part of the firearm, or a firearm accessory.
So a bill that essentially would make people that are in the firearms industry, those small businesses or even large businesses, not want to conduct business in Maryland for fear of exposing themselves to this sort of liability.
Absolutely. Originally, a private person could bring suit under this bill. That would obviously invite all kinds of foolishness. You would be looking for any kind of plaintiff. As a lawyer, I know lawyers who are in this business looking for any kind of plaintiff. Then we're going to sue the firearms manufacturer, the ammunition manufacturer, the manufacturer of whatever optic was on the firearm, the manufacturer of the magazine, the manufacturer of any of the furniture on the firearm, for any kind of tragedy that they had nothing directly to do with. In the bill that is actually passed in its final form and is off to the governor for his signature, the only ones now who can bring suit are going to be local municipal governments, so the counties or the city of Baltimore. Now, we've already seen, this is before this occurred, but Polymer 80 has agreed they will no longer sell firearm products in the state of Maryland in a settlement with the city of Baltimore. This now invites every municipality, county in the city of Baltimore, if they so choose, if there are situations they feel are out there, which I'm sure they do, to turn around and sue these firearm manufacturers as well as your local gun store and everyone else. You all are smart people. You know there's going to be an impact at your local gun store as a result of this. A lot of gun stores, their profit margins are great, but they're not designed to pay for a $7, $8, $10, $15 million lawsuit against them and the associated legal fees and everything else. So this is going to be very interesting to see how this actually plays out and the damage it can do to the Second Amendment.
So when they can't go after your guns or your ammo, they go after it a different way. They go after the supplier. They try to tax it out of existence. They use whatever they can to try and skirt and get around and accomplish their goals.
Yes, and they don't even have to be based in Maryland. They just have to have an intention to do business in Maryland. So if you say, oh, I'll just buy my ammunition online, be prepared that that's going to be a problem. And anyone who's purchased ammunition online, you see there's states such as New Jersey that a lot of suppliers won't even ship to. And it's because of laws like this.
Yeah, I mean, myself included, you try and buy certain things, and I won't name the company, certain firearms and things from companies that are in other states, and they won't ship them to you. They say, we just don't do business in Maryland. So this is just another way to try and dissuade and force these other businesses to not do business with us here in Maryland. All right, so really no meaningful attempts at addressing or curbing the rash of juvenile crimes and violence and other things in the Baltimore metro area, just more drivel, huh?
They introduced a number of really good common sense bills. And don't think it's just Republicans here. Democrat Delegate Attar, she's a Baltimore City state's attorney. She just recently left the office. She introduced a bill to make stealing a firearm a felony. I think we can all agree in this room we love the Second Amendment, and we would like it that if people stole our firearms, they'd be prosecuted and made into felons. Things like that are just common sense to let's actually go after the violence problem that we have in certain segments of the state got nowhere. Things to increase the penalties for using firearms and crimes of violence got nowhere.
Yeah, so like House Bill 304 and 659 that you were referring to, the theft of a firearm, the felony of that, both were cross-filed. House Bill 819 requiring school resource officers to be armed so they can actually help and protect our children, and House Bill 1178, which would have allowed permit holders to carry in state parks to protect themselves. Again, it seems more to be about the agenda than it actually is about public safety.
It astounds me that if you're a Baltimore City school police officer and you are assigned full-time to work in a school, you cannot carry a firearm with you while in uniform performing your duties.
You have to lock it up before you go into the building or in a specific lockbox in the building. It's insane. It's absolutely ridiculous.
but yet school shootings, we're going to turn around and sue the firearms manufacturer.
All right. Well, we have reached our intermission period, so we're going to take 15 minutes to allow everyone to use the restroom and talk with the vendors. We're going to pick back up at about 7:15, and then we're going to get into the additional litigation and question and answer, and we'll take it from there. So we'll be back. All right. Okay, so we're back. So, Andrew, where are we at with the legal challenges to Maryland Senate Bill 1, the dreaded and hated Senate Bill 1, as well as the HQL litigation? What updates do you have for us?
I figured everyone felt so much safer after Senate Bill 1 passed that we'd have a room full of fans of it. I just can't imagine. Senate Bill 1, the challenge continues in front of Judge Russell in the United States District Court down there in Baltimore City. And there have been no filings since November 20th of 2023. And the last one dealt with the private property rule. I don't know if you all have been following it closely, but originally the private property rule was enjoined, meaning it was not illegal for me to carry a firearm onto someone else's private property without them giving me affirmative permission in advance.
Private residential?
Private residential, yes. That has been unenjoined. So now in Maryland, the law of the land, if you go onto someone else's private residential property and go into their home and do not have explicit permission from them in advance to carry a firearm there, you're committing a misdemeanor and face time in jail.
So ways to get that affirmative prior permission could be a word of mouth, it could be a text message, an email, it could be a sign posted at the front door.
All of these would work. But if you don't have it, you can't technically get it after the fact to comply with the law. So be warned.
So this would be your neighbor's house, your nephew's house, anyone's private residential property in Maryland.
Correct.
So businesses are still technically enjoined.
Yes.
As well as within 1,000 feet of a demonstration in a public place.
Those instances are enjoined. You still cannot bring it into a hospital, a school, things of that nature.
All right. And the alcohol establishments, that was also enjoined, correct?
Correct. So you can carry your firearm to TGI Fridays or a bar. Even if it is inadvisable, you can do so.
Right. Just don't drink a whole bottle of wine or something like that. Wild.
That would be a poor idea.
Okay, very good. And then the other thing, I believe Senate Bill 1 was regarding the highway rest areas.
Very controversial.
Right. So essentially what it is now is that you can have it as long as it is concealed and not discharged in an unlawful manner?
Yes. Highway rest areas, known for a large volume of shootings, lots of problems. So we had to make sure no one can carry a firearm to a highway rest area.
I don't know. I think you'd probably want one in there.
I
Some
agree.
of them.
And I've never heard of a shooting at a highway rest area, but that's just me.
Me either. So, all right. So what about HQL?
Things have been getting spicy with the HQL. The Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, so that's, you have the district court, that's the lowest level in the federal system. The level above that is the circuit courts of appeals, and here in Maryland, we fall in the Fourth Circuit. A 3-judge panel heard the HQL challenge, and they ruled 2-1 that the HQL was unconstitutional. Then the government, under Anthony Brown, our Attorney General, appealed that and asked for an en banc review. En banc, it's a French word, 2 French words, essentially asking that the whole court rehear it. So all 15 judges on the Fourth Circuit heard this back in March, and we're going to be waiting for their opinion. It's probably going to come later this summer, maybe July, June, around there, if not later. And the 15 are going to vote, is the HQL constitutional or is it unconstitutional? Whoever loses, I would bet you every dollar I have in my wallet right now is going to try and appeal it to the Supreme Court. Will the Supreme Court take the case? I have no idea, but this is not over, and it won't be over anytime soon, I fear. But we just want to cross our fingers and hope that the Fourth Circuit comes down in our favor.
So let's say that we win the HQL ruling and the Supreme Court decides that they are not going to hear it. Is that the end of it then?
That will be the end of it for here in Maryland for the foreseeable future.
Understood. Okay, so anything further on either of those two?
Just pay attention. They continue to shift in an instant, and don't be caught in a disadvantageous situation because you are ignorant of the law. There's a famous maxim, ignorance of the law is no excuse.
Absolutely. And things are constantly changing, honestly, more now than I can remember in the time that I've been involved in this, which is really the reason why we created the podcast, was to try to keep people informed, because what's legal today may not be legal tomorrow. Once that ruling happens on Senate Bill 1, if you're not paying attention, if it's not in our favor, today you're in a public place or a business and it's legal to have your firearm as a concealed carry holder or otherwise. And then tomorrow, when it changes, it's not. So it's very important to stay up on things. So we certainly encourage you to pay attention and subscribe to the podcast if that's something you'd like to do. So with that said, I would now like to open the floor up to some questions. We have a couple people. We have two people that are going to speak afterwards, but I'd like to open the floor up to any questions you have. So just come on up to the mic. We do ask that you speak directly into the microphone so that we can hear your question and everyone else can hear your question. So please feel free to step up now.
Okay, regarding the Accountability Act, how does that work for instructors? So if I sign off on somebody's HQL or wear and carry permit, they do something stupid and criminal, is there any danger to an instructor on that level for liability?
Well, let's pull this back up here and take a look at it real quick. When you look at the definitions of who would be included, I don't think so. But let's go a firearm industry member. And that's going to be a person engaged in the sale, manufacture, distribution, importation, or marketing of a firearm-related product. And you go a firearm-related product, firearm, ammunition, component or part of a firearm, or a firearm accessory. Are you doing anything of that nature?
No.
So I don't think you're covered under this, the firearm accountability. Once again, didn't pass. If you signed off on someone who I could show was clearly deranged, and during your class they're scribbling notes, can't wait to get a gun and kill my wife. They tell you this, they look off, they tell everyone else in the class this, and you still sign off on it, I could sue you, I'm sure, if he did go and kill his wife. I, though, don't think that has anything to do with the Firearm Accountability Act.
I have a second question. So now that people are able to bring their firearms into establishments that serve liquor, I get this question from my students. I looked it up and they said you cannot be concealed carrying your firearm and be under the influence. So I had to look up what does Maryland consider under the influence, and the only thing I found is anything above a 0.08 blood alcohol level. Is that what that law means or no? And I tell people, if you have your firearm, do not go out and drink alcohol.
So I would say impairment. Again, you're finding the motor vehicle law. So
right, and that's
which
all
is
I
all
could
that
find.
is the only place
Yeah.
that I think mentions an actual level of impairment, unless I'm incorrect. I think it would be if you could show impairment, and they're going to take your blood.
Yes, it's going to be a subjective standard. You cannot rely on the 0.08 that is in the motor vehicle law for operating a motor vehicle, as that's going to be synonymous with impaired with a firearm.
Okay, so there really is no real definition of impaired?
Correct. And they prefer it that way because they want it to be a fuzzy, soft standard. So if you've had one beer and you're at a bar and a criminal comes in and tries to rob the place and you blow them away, they might be able to look at liability or criminality on your part as well.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
All right, thanks for doing this.
Thank you.
I'll ask you the easy one first. The laws that did pass, when do they go into effect?
October 1st.
Okay. If the liability law for the $300,000 goes into effect in the future, does USCCA membership cover that?
That's a great question, and actually, we're going to be talking about that in a moment. Yep. So stay tuned for that. We'll have Chris come up and address that in a moment.
And do you know a date or a time for the decision on SB1?
No, there is no hearing scheduled. For whatever reason, I don't think either side is aggressively pushing this. I think the government is aware that they're in a very precarious position, and if they push it all the way, they're probably going to lose. Not that they care, they're also going to incur hundreds of thousands of dollars in attorney's fees they're going to have to pay to the plaintiffs. I think the plaintiffs at the same time have taken their win and aren't pushing this because they don't want to expend hundreds of thousands of dollars to get a better judgment. So for the time being, eventually it will be pushed forward, but no one is clamoring. There's no trial set. They may be conducting discovery, but nothing formal is on the court's calendar.
Got it. And in reference to your law firm or your experience with Second Amendment self-defense law firms defending clients, does your firm keep experts and investigators? Do you use the same ones? Do you have them ready to go?
The first mistake anyone can make is that assuming every shooting case is going to be the same. So to answer your question, yes, we have experts we can get, but it would be malpractice on my part to assume that the expert I use in case A is what I'm going to need for case D. There's going to be a huge difference between you shooting someone that's breaking in through a window of your kitchen at 2 a.m. and it turns out, unfortunately, it's your neighbor's disabled child and it's a bad shoot. That expert is going to be very different than you're on a dark alley in, God forbid, the city of Baltimore, your car's broken down, and 6 juveniles attack you with knives and bats, and you shoot them. I'm going to want a different expert in each one of those situations. And unfortunately or fortunately, like every self-defense encounter is going to be different. And when I was a prosecutor very early on in my career, they said that's the first mistake people start making is they assume, oh, this is another burglary case, so let's just treat it with a standard form without looking at the nuances. What is the issue? Is the issue the lighting? Is the issue your physical ability? Is the issue the number of attackers? Is the issue the location where it happened? Is the issue that you fired 20 shots or that you fired 3? You know, if you ever fire more than one shot, the Monday morning quarterbacks are going to come out and say, why did he shoot him more than once? Different expert for every single scenario I just outlined.
That's not to say you should only shoot one time, by the way.
Absolutely.
He's just making a statement.
But everyone's seen it in the news. Anytime that anyone, why didn't you just shoot him in the arm? Why didn't you just shoot him in the leg? Et cetera, et cetera. So every one of those situations is going to require a different expert. Whatever it is, my law firm is fully equipped. We routinely represent individuals that have had encounters using firearms where self-defense is a serious issue.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
This may be a little off of where we are. It's a specific question, but you had raised the point of one of the bills that did not pass, which was the Glock kind of multiple shots.
That passed, the auto sear.
Oh,
Any
okay.
of you that have auto sears out there, make sure they're registered with the ATF. That's one of the exceptions. But if they're not, you're now a criminal after October 1st on the state level. You are probably already a criminal on the federal level, but we don't have enough to do here in Maryland. So,
Well, the question that I had, suppose a war vet comes home with a automatic weapon. Yeah, I mean, it could be a Thompson, it could be a grease gun, you know, any of those. They would have to have I mean, is it illegal to just own them? Or you have to have the tax stamp to shoot them?
You want me to field
right
that one?
ahead.
Okay, so as someone who's pretty familiar about NFA firearms, the firearms that are registered in the NFA had to have been lawfully owned and registered by May 19th of 1986. There was an amnesty in 1968 for such weapons. So people brought things back from World War II or wherever, and they find this machine gun. The government did an amnesty, and it didn't matter whether the gun was stolen, whether you had illegally converted it. They allowed those to be registered. Now, after May 19th of 1986, that was over. There was no more retroactive or any type of registration. So if you were to find a machine gun, let's say, for instance, someone passes away and you find a Thompson, let's say, the first thing is these things are very, very valuable if they're lawfully registered. So what you would want to do is you would want to contact the National Firearms Act Bureau of ATF over at Martinsburg, West Virginia, with the serial number of the weapon. You're going to explain, again, these folks are more interested in compliance. You're going to have to give them the serial number. They're going to have to look it up. If the weapon is in fact registered, they're going to want to make sure that they get the correct paperwork to the correct owner. So if you're the person who is the heir of that person, they're going to make sure that they get copies of that paperwork to you so that you can properly register that gun in your name. If, in fact, the gun is not lawfully registered or was never lawfully registered, it would then be contraband. Now, you wouldn't necessarily be in any trouble, but they are going to take that firearm. And I'm very familiar with that process, not them taking it, but the process of what we just discussed. So does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, I let me make sure I understand. If Uncle Harry, who fought in World War II, turns up with a Thompson, say, I can't, I mean, if he picked it up off the battlefield and brought it home, then there's no way to trace that back, I guess.
Well, unless it was registered prior to May 19th of 1986, it cannot be registered. So that would mean that if he just brought it back and squirreled it away in his attic for however 50 years, and you're just now finding it, there is no retroactive registration, that gun would be contraband. It's probably worth about $1,800 or $1,800 to $2,500 as a parts kit with a cut receiver. But other than that, you cannot retroactively register it, nor could you continue to possess it in its form.
Gotcha.
In this latest law, for better or worse, would not be the reason you couldn't do this.
Hey, thanks a lot. One quick question about carrying in the private homes. Do you need that every time you go in, or do you just talk to all your buddies and say, hey, I carry, can I bring it to the house when I come over? Am I covered then, or is it every time I go over there with a different person, or how's that work?
You would be, give me a factually rich scenario here. What are you're asking, you're going to go to your buddy John's house.
I'm a neighbor across the street,
Okay.
and one, 6 miles away. I go over there quite often. Do I need to tell them now every time? Do I need a written permission slip like hunting on the property, or
no.
what?
If he gave you blanket permission once until it's revoked, that's good. Now, I hate to say it, sooner or later you're going to have a scenario where your neighbor John gave you permission, something happens, and he's going to say, no, I never gave him permission. At that point, you're screwed unless you can prove he had given you permission, or that he had a sign outside or something like that.
Thanks for having this meeting. My question is, what do you...
Can you, closer to the microphone, I can't hear you over the AC, sorry. You're tall like me.
Yeah, is that clear?
Yeah.
All right, my question is, what do you think the real agenda that the burden is put on us versus the criminals? Do you think it's a ill agenda, or do you think it's ignorance? What do you think it is?
There is a certain state senator who has said openly, and he is one of the lead sponsors on every one of these bills, that he does not think that firearms should ever leave the home, and that he is doing whatever he can. And, he's going to use these fancy words like common sense, gun control, and community safety. He would prefer that firearms never leave your home, period, full stop. And anything he can do to make it more difficult for that firearm to ever walk out of the house with you, he's going to do it. So by banning the places you can take it to, taxing the ammunition to going to it, requiring you to have liability insurance, these all sound like great things to him.
Would this be the same person that came up with the lovely Senate Bill 1?
Yes.
Okay.
So do you think they don't know that that 98%, like the gun-free zones, 98% of the crimes happen in gun-free? Do you think they don't know this, or you think they know it and they still want
I
us
think
to
it's
be?
a mixed bag. I think a lot of them have an agenda. I think they don't care. I think that a lot of them don't care about public safety. As we saw, there was a number of quote-unquote common sense bills that didn't make it, right? Gun Theft Felony Act, arming school resource officers, allowing people that have carry permits to protect themselves in state parks, common sense stuff. I think that they have an agenda. Their agenda is diametrically opposed to ours, which is pro-Second Amendment. I don't think they believe that we should have those rights. And I think a lot of them are going to pass things that are just, they know that they can't outright attack it. So I think that they're going to do it in roundabout ways to make it more difficult, little by little by little. And I think on the other hand, there are people that are the, what do they call them? The useful idiots.
Yes.
That will go along with it, and they believe in the words, common sense, gun control, save the children, and all this other stuff, when at the end of the day, I think the agenda is quite clear.
During Senate Bill 1, they were explicitly asked, list all the crimes committed by permit holders. Silence ensued, yet they restricted the rights of permit holders.
In 2013, when we were down in Annapolis for that nonsense, and the line of people in opposition to the anti-gun bills was down the street, around the corner, people driving through, honking their horns. Some of you may have even been there. I was there. Yep, there you go. He and I were there. James was there. And the line of people in support of these anti-gun bills was pretty much non-existent, and they did what they wanted to do anyway. So I'm not saying that to make everyone feel bad. I'm just saying you asked the question, and I think they have an agenda.
And my last question is because I've meeting some political figures that's starting to feel the way we feel, but they can't stand up to the party. What would your suggestion be for the ones that's kind of in silent, but their mind frame, they kind of agree, but they can't speak up against the party? What would your suggestion be?
Support them. Let them know you support them. Have your friends support them. The reason they're unwilling to speak up is because former Mayor Michael Bloomberg has, through his organizations, dispersed millions of dollars in local political races. Moms Demand Action, Every Town for Gun Safety, etc., to influence politicians because they think there are not enough people that are going to actually care about this in Maryland to come out to the ballot box and vote. Right now, the reason taxes did not go up further this year is because, for better or worse, Larry Hogan is ahead in a Washington Post poll for the U.S. Senate. They were terrified, particularly Governor Moore is terrified. He has presidential aspirations that Larry Hogan will win the comfortably Democratic state of Maryland to be its U.S. Senator, and this will be a black eye for him and ruin his presidential aspirations. So get out, vote, get your friends to vote, and that's how we can win this.
Hi. My daughter works for a county park. I know you can't carry firearms in a county park. I've seen where, because last time she's by herself after dark, she's been threatened before. So I've seen that they have an air-fired, tear gas. Is that something?
Sometimes stuff like that works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you shoot somebody and you got to shoot them a bunch more times because the delay and the reaction because of adrenaline and things like that. So there's no way of saying with 100% certainty that something like that is always going to work. The last podcast we filmed with Nicolai Ambrose and Delegate Chris Tomlinson, we were talking about the bill that would have allowed the carrying of handguns by concealed carry holders in parks, and how ridiculous it was that these are people that already have carry permits. But how ridiculous it was that they were against it. But yeah, unfortunately, and devices like that, you also need to check your local laws to make sure that that's not a violation of some sort of local ordinance or something.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question about the residential carrying, your concealed carry into somebody's residential house. Understanding that if you don't have the permission ahead of time, how do they enforce that?
You come to my house. I am a Marxist. I do not believe in the ownership of firearms. While we were there, someone comes in and tries to rob us. You save my life and shoot and kill them. The police show up and say, did he have permission to have this firearm on your property? I say, no. I don't even believe in private property, then they arrest you.
And again, I'm really confused about that. Is that in effect now, or is that
Yes.
October? Oh, it is now.
Right now.
Right
this,
now.
This was last year's wonder. Senate Bill 1.
Okay, got it.
The
Thank
gift
you.
that keeps on giving.
Okay.
Two questions apparently weren't enough. As far as Montgomery County goes, I understand they have some different and special rules other than what the rest of Maryland has.
A lot of those, I don't go to Montgomery County because for a lot of reasons, a lot of them have been enjoined as well. But ironically, the state senator that goes to the General Assembly and hates firearms is from Montgomery County. And they have a little cabal down there that tries to pass all these laws that say, oh, it's illegal for you to carry your firearm in Montgomery County, things like that. So a lot of those have been enjoined, but don't be surprised if, it's illegal to carry a firearm while walking with a dog in Montgomery County. They will do that.
All right, thank you.
I got one more quick question.
We only allow one.
All right, I'm a very simple guy, and I can't understand all that legalese when I try to go to the law and read where I can and can't carry.
Thank you. I
What
need
these
job
what these
security.
updates are. Is there a place that you can go where it's written in normal English that I can understand?
Well, we can do better. We don't have it written, but we have it in the spoken word. So if you go back to that table after this is over, I will give you a card that has 2 QR codes, and we do this all the time, and we broadcast it, and it's recorded. So when there's changes like Senate Bill 1 injunction and things like that, we will release a video that will be very specific about those changes and all of that. As far as like a handbook or something, they tried to do that.
There was a law proposed this year that would require the Attorney General in plain English to author a pamphlet detailing the state of Maryland gun laws that was to be freely distributed to all
And
Maryland
very
citizens.
simple. I was hoping it was going to be like those cartoon pamphlets that they dropped over France
Yes.
during World War II.
Yes.
But at any rate, that failed, though. That
failed
was,
miserably.
That was
Failed
one of those
miserably.
common sense bills
Yeah.
that didn't make it. But yes, they were supposed to publish something like that. The state police, I believe, was
Yeah.
supposed to publish something like that, but that bill did not make it.
The closest thing I found is that USCCA reciprocal app that has a lot of it, but it's still not really all up to date and clear for the many states that I have to go through.
Well, and things are constantly changing, and they are definitely changing in Maryland. So the best thing I can say is just stay tuned, and we'll do the best we can to push this information out. But as far as a single source, I just don't know of a written single source.
Everything you read on the internet is true. Just remember that part.
Go to Facebook and just get it
Yeah.
all off of there, right?
The legislature is out there eroding your rights around the edges, and there are going to be individuals out there who are going to try and take advantage of that situation, and an individual like you is the one who gets crushed in the middle, and it's very unfortunate.
I have a question about, let's say you're a contractor and you go in and out of, basically you're doing rehab work. You're going in and out of vacant properties, whether they're single home, row home, multifamily. It's under construction. Are there any permissions? Are you able to just, because you're going in and out, or you're there all day?
Well, it's still residential property that, even though it's owned by the bank at that point, it's private residential property. I would assume then that you would need the permission of whoever has the authority over that property, unless I'm.
Absolutely.
So if you're rehabbing a home, my suspicion would be that if you're rehabbing a home that is abandoned and owned by the bank or some company and you're fixing it for them, then you would need to have their permission in advance to be armed while on the premises. That would be my guess. Anyone else?
Once again, goes to show the insanity of the law that you're in a vacant property and you better have permission to have a firearm.
And we know vacant properties in the city especially are the most safe places you can go to.
Very safe, very
So-
safe.
All right, so going back to one of the questions, I want to introduce Paul. Paul, why don't you come up and you can talk on what you wanted to talk about. Just grab that and go over there so we get you on camera.
Thank you, gentlemen. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Paul Blitz. I live here in the Essex area, and I am the Chief of Staff for State Delegate Rick Metzger. The information these gentlemen have given to you this evening is very, very important. Most of the gun bills are introduced. They go to the House Judiciary Committee, which technically at one time was made up mostly of attorneys. That has since changed. There are more people from various backgrounds that are on that. So if you have a vital concern, I can tell you, if you write, because I get these emails, this is why I'm trying to give you some inside baseball. If you write your legislators, now these are your state people, and tell them, hi, my name is Joe Blow, I'm a voter in your district, that gets their immediate attention. Some people have the tendency to send emails to all 188 members of the Maryland General Assembly. People are turned off by that. Okay, I understand the importance of wanting to reach out to everyone, but write to your local representatives in the legislature and let them know how you feel. But most important, the opening line is, I am a resident and registered voter in your district. Okay. Secondly of all, then when these gun bills are being tracked and are being followed, then it goes before, as I said, the House Judiciary Committee. That's made of about 15 to 20 individuals. They're the ones that are going to actually vote on these bills or not vote on these bills and kill some of these bills. I can tell you I was tracking this because people have asked me, regarding the bill of the liability insurance. Okay, that did not make it out of committee. That's not to say that it may not make it out of committee in 2025 or beyond that. So this is something that's constantly needs to be vigilant. This is something that needs to be followed on a regular basis. But let your legislators know that you do not like, what you're seeing here. And again, since they've had these right to carry laws that have been in place, they're trying to find more and more ways, as has been discussed this evening, of where you can and when you cannot carry. And yes, they are in fact restricting your rights. Thank you for the opportunity, gentlemen.
Thank you for coming, Paul. Chris, you had something you wanted to talk about as well. Why don't you come on up and do that?
Thank you guys very much. The question that arose about how the USCCA applies to the $300,000 liability requirement that could have been passed but did not get passed yet. The USCCA membership in particular does not speak to that. And the reason is because it's looking for a CGL, so a commercial general liability policy is, and firearms liability in particular. So really what the major focus that they want covered in that piece is going to be things like negligent discharges and stuff of that. So the USCCA membership is specifically to self-defense liability. So in the case that you're put into a self-defense specific incident, that is where the USCCA membership comes into play. Now, if you're someone who needs that self-defense, that commercial general liability in the case that does go through, Delta Defense does have what's called Delta Insurance Solutions, DIS. We do have access to gaining stuff of that, but it's an individual underwriting process. So they're going to basically make the assessments based off of your specific risk level. So the premiums do vary in that circumstance, but we do have something that is a solution in that circumstance if that were to go through. And if that is the case, all you guys have to do is just call the 800 number, let them know that, hey, this got passed in Maryland. I need access to this specific piece. And what they'll do is they'll send you over an email directly to that. Or if it does end up getting passed, I'll provide Duane with a direct link for you guys to be able to go straight from there. And then I'll make sure that he pumps out an email to everybody as part of that, because it's going to be a very quick push in that circumstance.
Thank you, Chris. All right, so as we wrap up, I would like to remind everyone that myself, Andrew, Chris, and our vendors in the back will be sticking around. If you're interested in the Urban Defense Podcast or our firearms training program, stop by the table and see me. I'll be happy to talk to you for as long as you want to talk tonight about any of that stuff. Also, find the Urban Defense Podcast on YouTube, Spotify. We're on all major podcast outlets. And please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Please share it. Please subscribe. It really helps us to spread the word and the message. So for the Urban Defense Podcast, the USCCA, our guests, sponsors, and vendors, our staff, thank you so much for attending. Use good judgment. Don't forget that knowledge is mental ammunition. And remember, train, fight, and win. Good night. Thank you.